As we continue the debate on one of the most important foreign policy matters this body has addressed in some time, I would be remiss if I didn't mention how honored I am to be a part of it. It's not unusual for the Congress to engage in debate over matters like spending bills or to authorize various federal agencies or executive branch judicial nominations or other business that we routinely attend to around here. But it's only on occasion that this body gets to have the opportunity to weigh in on some of the more pressing foreign policy matters. When it does, the legislation it considers often has lasting consequences for the United States and for the rest of the world. Take, for example, the Taiwan Relations Act, passed by both chambers in 1979 in response to normalization of relations between the U.S. and China. This piece of legislation remains the cornerstone of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship to this day. Likewise, this body has considered a number of arms limitation treaties over the decades between the United States and Russia. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, or START, was approved by this body in 1992 by a vote of 93-6. START 2 was approved in 1996. I'm sorry, the former was 1992. START 2 was approved in 1996 by a vote of 87-4. Most recently, the new START treaty with Russia was approved in 2010 by a vote of 71-26. These bills address subject matter that was highly controversial. I'm sure there was a fair amount of disagreement between Democrats and Republicans, and between the Congress and the White House. But in instances too numerous to count, Senate deliberation ended with a bipartisan vote to set U.S. foreign policy in place for years, even decades, and signaled that America was speaking to the rest of the world with one voice. I deeply regret that the JCPOA will not build on this history. Unfortunately, the administration elected to negotiate this deal as an executive agreement rather than a treaty. That was the administration's call. It does mean, however, that the administration did not need to negotiate the JCPOA, mindful that it would need the support of 67 senators. It also means that the Senate did not have the opportunity to offer so-called RUDs, reservations, understandings, and declarations that can accompany treaties and clarify its interpretation of the agreement. Now, to be sure, there are several troubling aspects of this agreement that could have been improved had the Senate had the opportunity to consider the JCPOA as a treaty. For example, the text of the agreement clearly states that any reimposition of sanctions specified in Annex 2 would be viewed by Iran as a violation of the agreement and would likely prompt Iran to cease abiding by its obligations under the agreement. The sanctions in Annex 2 include the influential sanctions, such as those on Iran's central bank. These have had a profound effect on Iran's economy. In hearings and briefings by the administration, I've asked whether the United States could reimpose these powerful sanctions at some point down the line for non-nuclear behavior by the Iranian government to penalize Iran for regional activities or for committing acts of terrorism. This regime, as we know, has made achieving regional hegemony its calling card since its inception in 1979. But the administration assured me that these sanctions would be available in the future, but unfortunately, that simply does not square with the text of the agreement. The question of reimposition of sanctions raises a further question of how this agreement might bind the hands of future Congresses and future administrations. As I previously mentioned, though the JCPOA has already been adopted by the United Nations, it will never be the supreme law of the land in the United States because it is not a treaty. A treaty that has been agreed to by at least 67 senators gives the treaty a critical imprimatur that insulates it from political winds over the lifespan of the treaty. The JCPOA will benefit from no such imprimatur. And what if, for example, a future Congress or president wishes to reimpose sanctions against Iran or take some other action that might legitimately cause Iran to accuse us of violating the JCPOA? A future Congress or president could be put in the position of either having to preserve an agreement that neither of it had a hand in negotiating, or taking action that would result in Iran walking away from its nuclear obligations. It would be beneficial for U.S. foreign policy to steer clear of those lose-lose propositions. The current administration has already expressed reluctance to push back against Iran's interpretation of the agreement, even before it has been implemented. I have serious concerns that if there is reluctance to push back now, there will be even more reluctance to push back on Iran's regional behavior once the deal is in place. This gives Iran more leverage than it currently has moving forward, and it could have disastrous consequences for the Middle East. These are issues that could have been addressed in a positive manner by the Senate if the agreement had been submitted as a treaty. Now, when this agreement was announced, I said that I would take every opportunity to learn more about it. I attended every hearing held by the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. I want to commend Chairman Corker and Ranking Member Cardin for holding these hearings and going about this in such a deliberative, serious manner. I attended every classified congressional briefing, several other briefings, and had discussions with numerous experts and administration officials. After these discussions, these hearings, these briefings, I believe that it's a much closer call on this agreement than most want to admit. There are positive aspects on the nuclear side. Unfortunately, I think this deal suffers from significant shortcomings. Hoping that Iran's nuclear ambitions might change after a 15-year sabbatical might be a bet worth taking. Believing that Iran's regional behavior will change tomorrow while giving up tools to deter or modify such behavior is not a bet worth taking. It is for these reasons that I reluctantly oppose the JCPOA. I do hope that we can make up for this unfortunately partisan vote by working together and with the President to pass a regional security framework agreement that will not only assure Israel and our allies in the region, but solidify this agreement throughout the duration of the JCPOA. The United States is strongest when we speak with one voice on foreign policy matters.